many well-known publications such as the Sunday Times and the Daily Mail. She was a vocal opponent of the Iraq War and a supporter of the Stop the War coalition. In August 2008, she travelled to Gaza by ship from Cyprus to highlight the blockade of the Gaza Strip and deliver hearing aids and balloons to a deaf school in Gaza. She chose to remain behind in Gaza and was subsequently refused entry into both Israel and Egypt. She said that she believed that by refusing her the right to leave Gaza and return to her home country, Israel and Egypt were in breach of Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, specifically regarding the freedom of movement. Last year, she chose to become Muslim in the holy city of Qum. Please welcome me in joining onto stage our keynote speaker for this evening, Lauren Booth.
Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. And to the Arab people amongst you, Kifa Halek. I don't know how to say that in Iranian. I really should know how to say, how are you doing in Iranian? Anybody? All right. I'll learn it from Press TV. Thank you. Mercy. I'm here tonight to celebrate the work of a charity that has really touched my heart. And I can see by everybody here who knows, and has probably been here for the 6th year running, you know it much better than I do, but really the work of Mr. Kareem and all of the other patrons and all of the volunteers here tonight deserves our gratitude, because looking after orphans and those who struggle to make ends meet and those with disabilities is something that, as Muslims, as human beings, we hold that so much more important than how successful we might be and our own egos. So I'm going to give a little taste tonight of what I'd like to share with you, which is my journey to Islam. Because I have to say, a year ago, I couldn't imagine myself standing here without my blonde hair out, without other bits of me out, really. Probably without a glass of wine in my hand. So it seems like a very sudden journey, but it began as so much of what I call my real life began in Palestine in 2005. In 2005, I was a journalist living in France in a nice little farmhouse, writing articles about living in France in a nice little farmhouse, which is a good job if you can get it. I also wrote about politics, but I had no sensation of needing to do something for anyone else. It just hadn't really occurred to me. I thought I was a nice person, but really my ego was out of control. The media does terrible things to a human being, and it certainly doesn't enlighten us or put us on a spiritual path, but there is one being who puts us on a spiritual path, and I didn't know either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or that I was on that path. So in 2005, when the Palestinian delegate to the United Kingdom, Afif Safir, said to me, Lauren, you've shown some interest in Palestine. Why don't you go? I said to him, is there anything else I could do to show interest in Palestine? Because I was scared. Because somehow, deep inside me, I'd absorbed all of the media preconceptions about Arabs and all of the suppositions about the bogeymen of the 21st century, Muslims. No, I didn't ever externalize that because it wasn't real to me. But I'll tell you, when I first crossed into the West Bank that night in January the 19th, 2005, and I went through an Israeli checkpoint, I knew then that I had a definite mild dose of Islamophobia. I'll remember that moment when I went into the West Bank, because the Israeli soldier looked at my passport as I went through in the taxi and said, British. Hey, we love Britain. You can love that, can't you? An American in an Israeli uniform welcoming a Briton to his land. It made me feel a little bit sick. So I went through into Ramallah, and I was lucky enough to get an interview with Mahmoud Abbas. And I remember that well because I found myself surrounded by 6'5" Palestinians holding guns in a lift. And I remember the door of the lift closing, and the men were talking in their walkie-talkies. And to me it sounded something like this. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yalla, yalla, yalla. Bukra, bukra, bukra. And in my head a little subtitle came up, "We'll kill the white woman later." And when I looked at the guns, I thought, you know, I've seen this film before and it doesn't go well for the blonde lady. It was really, really deeply ingrained in me that Palestinians were terrorists, that people from other parts of the world who were Muslims were aggressive, that Islam was against me. If I was good, I could not be a Muslim. And Muslims couldn't be good because they couldn't help themselves being bad. Strange to think of that now, standing here. That first trip to Palestine, I went for Eid in Jenin, and I had to travel in a car with a lovely young lady called Natalie. We were going to visit her family. And a journey that should take around 2.5 hours from Ramallah to Jenin took us 7.5 hours. Everywhere along the route, the Israelis had pulled boulders into the road, or had bulldozed the road altogether. We had to go up and down mountains, talk about off-roading, but off-roading in a 25-year-old Volvo is not funny. I actually threw up 3 times. We ended up getting out on a rocky hillside, and I watched with horror men, women, and children preparing for their religious festival of joy, carrying bags and dragging suitcases down the hillside to try and find people to give them a lift on the other side. And when we got to Jenin, in the refugee camp, I went for a walk around on my own to see what it was like. And I remember a little boy there, terrible eye problem, all scabbed over, very difficult to look at, and the other one half closed with pus. The sort of treatments that are curable, that the Lady Fatima Trust puts money into. And his eyes were all gummed up, and he pointed a gun at me, a toy gun. And I was standing there going, come on, I'm a visitor, it's okay, it's okay. His eyes were kind of blank. There was trauma there. So I was standing there going, oh, we're playing a game. And suddenly the taxi driver who'd driven me there jumped in front of me and pulled the gun to the ground. It was a real gun. That's how unhappy, how terrorized the children of Jenin were at that point. Then I had the extreme pleasure of going to Gaza in 2008 with the Free Gaza movement. Spending time in the world's biggest concentration camp, I will call it a concentration camp. It's hard to describe it as a pleasure, but I promise you it is. I was there for a month in 2008. I remember visiting a lady's house. Well, really a cement room in a refugee camp. Everybody there greeted me. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? Assalamu alaikum. Cup of tea. People so smiling and so friendly that all of those headlines that called it Hamastan, the Islamic enclave, the terrorist republic of Palestine, they just dissolved. I'd gone into another world, a world where the children grabbed you by the hand and gave you smiles, where the women gave you the clothes off their backs, where they would feed you when they had no food. I realized I was falling in love with the Palestinian people. If any of you have read a very famous book called The Road to Mecca by Muhammad Assad, Does anybody know that book? I recommend it. It's